Welcome to the By Way of Commandment podcast, a podcast dedicated to the study of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the finer points of his doctrine. Join us as we study the gospel through the scriptures and standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Are you familiar with Bruce Porter?
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about this quite a bit. And what I've always kind of believed, but didn't really articulate, was I always believed that there was an original religion, if you want to call it that, or an original, let's say, ritual package in which the Lord delivered eternal truths and principles to his children, and that as the posterity of man continued to grow and separate and divide into tribes and things like that, some of those principles and things remained, but they were scattered with the people, and so some were changed here and there, but they all originally came back from one source or one true religion. And that's a minority view in the scholarship I'm learning. Most people take a more cognitive science of religion approach, in which we as humans just naturally have certain ideas and ideals kind of ingrained into us genetically, that any time in history with any group of people, some of these principles and ideas will pop up, and they'll take some slightly different forms. But there is no really one true religion. There's no original religion, so to speak. It's just people just have a natural propensity for certain beliefs, and they act them out in certain ways. And that's kind of the majority view right now, I think, in scholarship. But I don't believe that. I think originally, even if the creation story of Adam and Eve in the garden is more symbolic than literal, which I do believe to be the case, there was times in which the gospel was presented to mankind in a dispensation, with a dispensation head, who received it as much as they were able to receive in its true form, and from there disseminated throughout history until another dispensation head was called and another restoration occurred. And we've been doing this pattern on earth for centuries. That's kind of those are my general feelings on it. But
Yeah. No, I like that. I would agree with that. I would say too that it really is, without throwing any shade on anybody inadvertently, it really, to me, actually does kind of seem to be the difference between, say, a more godless, we're just kind of progressing and evolving, and that's what it is, versus like there was a pure original source from which all things dispensed. Those are like diametrically sort of opposed. They're different views. And the reason that matters is because if you have an original source from which all life flowed, the top of the mountain or something like that, then, I mean, it matters for lots of reasons, right? But if we take, let's say, Adam as the example, and this starts to get into the spirit of Elijah. And it's hard to talk about one thing without talking about everything, because it's all connected, right?
yeah,
But
it's so intertwined.
everything is, yeah. I mean, so if we start, I mean, we'll take, for example, man. Okay, so maybe the easiest way to talk about this is it's the difference between sort of this cosmic tree of life that's rooted in eternity itself, and something like a great and spacious building that's trying to build its way from the bottom up, but it truly actually has no foundation. Or the Tower of Babel, you might say. Those are like the two ways of looking at it. You can either be grafted into this true vine, which is this genealogy that goes back forever into eternity, and springs from the source of life itself, right? From eternity and endless life. Or it's like we're taking more of this like bottom up approach where we're just kind of gradually like putting the pieces together and building our way up to whatever we think heaven is, one step at a time. And those are different and they take you to different places. And you know, the good news, you might say, on the side of, we'll call it the true vine, is that all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole. And if all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole, then all people can be as well, right? You'd think, for example, if everyone were to turn their hearts back to their fathers far enough, that we would all be gathered together in one, in Adam, or something like that, right? That's like the general, maybe kind of way to think about it. And the issue is when people start to overgrow their roots and actually separate from the source that brought them into existence. And that like it matters a whole lot. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about that. Because it's interesting, I mean, it's at the very minimum, it is the proper way to orient yourself in the world, is to like recognize that everything you have comes down from above. It comes down as a gift from past generations, from past people that have made sacrifices in order to give you what you have and to put you where you are, right?
Yeah.
And paying proper homage to that, the spirit of life, right? The spirit that brings you into existence is part of what allows you to then perpetuate life onward, forward. And the story of the scriptures, time and time again, is people who stray from that and they get away from that more pure source, and then they become a dead branch. And, ultimately it ends up being an issue for them.
Yeah. Maybe we can kind of lay this out. Because this is the spirit of Elijah. This is your recent video you did a few weeks ago with Todd is all about. And you know, you guys have been talking about it for a long time. In fact, as I was thinking about it, I remember a 4-hour conversation I had with Todd maybe like a year and a half ago, in which a good chunk of that conversation was all about Elijah,
Mm.
and what that means. And I think back to that conversation that we had, and he made some interesting points that I didn't quite know what to do with yet. Um, and so your recent discussion together helped lay it out a little bit more. And so when you and I were talking about like maybe doing another podcast together or something, and you had just posted, I don't know, if it was the Facebook group or if it was the video
Mm.
first, but you had posted one or the other. I'm like, this is what we're doing. And whether you like it or not, you're going to come on my channel and you're going to talk about this. Um, so I appreciate you being willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I'm realizing more and more that it is everything. Like, and that I'm probably going to look back and like say, okay, actually, there's another thing that's actually greater that encompasses it all, which is it's probably something like Messiah or whatever that looks like. But as far as I can tell right now, everything about the restoration all comes together in the doctrine and spirit of Elijah.
So
So
for
go
for
ahead.
for a lot of people, I think who are um a lot of people in the church, we have a very specific view of what Elijah's mission and purpose was as it pertains to the church today.
Mm.
Um, we recognize uh, the tradition that Jewish people have had for literally millennia, um, of some at some point in the future day, Elijah is going to come probably during Passover. For what purpose? You'll get some different answers, but that has to happen to kind of usher in the time of the Messiah, the time, or the whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it a restoration, or you want to call it the end of days, or the eschaton, whatever it is, he's got to come back at some point. Latter Day Saints, we're very quick to raise our hand and say 1836. We know when he came back, and this is what he did. And he gave these specific priesthood keys to Joseph and the church that allow us to be sealed together as families and temples. And so that's why we do genealogy, so that we can take names of our ancestors to the temple, perform ordinances for them that are sacred, and allow them to receive those covenants and ordinances on the other side. And we kind of wrap it up in this nice little bow and say, here you go. That's the spirit of Elijah. That's what he came for. That's what we're doing. Um, and as you guys pointed out, and as you guys have been talking in your previous video, and I know you're going to have more in the future, there's a lot more to it than that. That's like surface level, but what's the root of the mission of Elijah, and is it different than the priesthood of Elijah that was promised to Joseph Smith by Moroni? That in the coming days, he would send the priesthood of Elijah.
Mhm.
Um, is there a difference, do you think, between like when you think about it, are you able to separate out like this is the general mission of Elijah and this is like the priesthood of Elijah, or is it so just over and so all encompassing that you can't parse them out?
Yeah, it's funny. The best way to answer that would just be to say it like they are all the same thing. And so I'll even actually go back a step further, maybe to illustrate this. Earlier in the conversation, you were talking about this idea of Messiah, right? An anointed one who essentially is called to be a divine agent, to represent God in some way. Um, and there's another sense in which there is one Messiah, in that there is one condition or nature that represents God. So in the lectures on faith, what we get in lecture 7 is that Christ is the prototype of a saved being, and that you are saved to the degree that you're like him or made like him. So one way to think about creation is that all creation is a path that Christ walks and invites all to follow. And it's the same order, it's the same priesthood over and over and over again. And um, of course, we know the spirit of Elijah, it prepares the way for the fullness that is Messiah, right? So these things are inextricably connected. We also know there's one priesthood, right? Joseph says all priesthood is Melchizedek. There are different portions or degrees. Um, all priesthood is intended to do the work of preparing the way for the fullness, which in this case it's the revelation of Jesus Christ and the fullness of his resurrected glory. So the priesthood of Elijah, this is the very first thing we get when Moroni shows up to Joseph Smith on the first night to sort of usher in his, to give him his divine call as a prophet in the restoration and to do the work that he's going to do. He quotes Malachi to him, and he's talking about Elijah, and he says, "I will reveal unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet." Um, okay, trying to think about how I want to say this without putting things out of order. The nature of the priesthood is to represent God. That's essentially what it is. You have to have an actual legitimate association with God, and then you embody his will here on earth, and you do what he would do. This is what it means to be one who's anointed. So, Christ, obviously, Jesus is the prototype, the archetypal example of what it means to be a son of the Father. The Son is the portion on earth that is the embodiment of the will of the Father. Just speaking symbolically, or as a pattern, he's the earthly manifestation. And so this continues to be true on all levels where there's a father-son relationship. And Jesus comes to represent the fullness of God's glory on earth, the fullness of who God is. Okay. I might have to edit this part because I don't want to lose my own train of thought here. So all priesthood is it's singular, it's the same. It's to represent God. Now, the other place where this gets tricky is that godhood and fatherhood and kinghood, like you've kind of alluded to earlier, are all the same. I actually think it is completely correct. Obviously, this is what the scriptures say, to say there's one God. The point that's being made is, of course, they're one in purpose, but when you think of this larger council of gods and lesser Elohim, right, that work under the Most High God, they function in unity as a body, right? It doesn't mean that there is no hierarchy. It doesn't mean that they are all exactly the same, but their oneness comes in the fact that they're aligned in their wills. So we read, for example, in the scriptures, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have received their exaltation, right? What does that mean? They've entered into their exaltation and are gods. And that's not something separate from being an extension of the true vine, embodying or representing or manifesting the will of God. This is the same thing that we see happen in Exodus when God essentially tells Moses that he's going to be God to Aaron and Aaron's going to be his prophet to the people, right? It's the same relationship because anything that Moses would do in his own context and sphere is going to be what God would do. So, what's priesthood? Well, priesthood is an association with the gods, you might say. It's an association with the fathers. It's to be grafted properly into this true vine and to be a living manifestation of the will of God. And of course, there are multiple fathers, and the degree of power that you will possess in the priesthood is going to be a function of who you are in connection with and who you're in association with. And in case that sounds like it's something that is really weird and non-doctrinal, I'd point you to the temple because this is the exact same pattern of being in connection with, say, true messengers of light. And by virtue of that association, having a degree of priesthood. And the intention of this whole path, this whole pattern or order is to, let's say, move up in your association or to have association with holier and holier beings and be blessed by virtue of that relationship, be changed by virtue of that relationship. So in a nutshell, that's priesthood. The reason Elijah reveals that is because his mission is to come to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers, right? It's all about creating this association with the fathers, with the gods, you might say, and then manifesting that will here on earth.
Yeah, there's an interesting I don't want to derail anything here, but to your point about association, that we receive truth and light by our association with others who have truth and light to give us. That as we continue to receive more, we're able to kind of ascend, so to speak, in our association until we are a part of the Elohim. We are a part of this divine council, and we are in association with the Father. Um, the the scriptures, the temple, all point to this pattern, and I would even point to pseudepigraphical texts like the Ascension of Isaiah is a fantastic one. The Testament of Levi. Um, the Apocalypse of Abraham is a perfect example of this as well, where the initiate in most of these texts, it's Abraham or Isaiah or Enoch or somebody, is literally caught up into the heavens, and they have an angelic guide, um, and their guide will take them as far as they are willing to go through the heavens. Um, and there may be 10 heavens, there may be 7 or 3, there may be 100, depends on the text. But in any case, you have to receive all of the light and truth and knowledge and glory of one heaven before you can be prepared to enter into the next one and continue to ascend. And the light and glory and knowledge and power usually comes in the form of some clothing, or ritual that has to be performed or received, or a name that has to be given and received. And you ascend between heavens, between realms, by uh, demonstrating your knowledge of the truth and light of that heaven, that realm. Um, and so your angelic guide is there, taking you through, taking the proverbial, um, you in these texts, is taking the initiate through the heavens until they get all the way up to the highest heavens where God the Father dwells. Um, and they are only there and able to enter into his presence because they have been willing to go through all of the sacrifices and everything necessary to ascend through each level, receiving the clothing and the names and the wisdom and light, um, all the way up, until they can, um, be brought back into the presence of the Father. And so that pattern is all throughout, these ancient texts. It's all throughout the scriptures, the temple. Um, let's get back to. I know I can go on for a little bit longer on this, because it's just really fascinating seeing our temple endowment basically, laid out in all these other texts from like 300 BC and stuff like that. I
Oh
think
yeah.
is fun. But the mission of Elijah, um, in and the way that you guys talked about it, between you and Todd, all revolved around this analogy of the roots and the branches, um, and making sure that we're grafted into the true root, the true vine, right? I mean, that's John chapter what, 14,
Yeah.
15.
Mhm.
Um, that whole chapter is all truth and light comes from the source. And I am, as Christ, I am manifesting the source to you. I am the vine. I am the true root that you are to be grafted in from, or that you are to be a branch of.
Mhm.
So can you lay this out a little bit more? Um, what does it actually look like for us to be a branch on this vine, or to be grafted in to the true vine, or the roots? What does that actually look like for us? It's a fantastic, model and analogy.
Mhm.
Um, but what does it actually look like in our day-to-day life?
Yeah, what's the boots on the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is that you have to be mindful of whose will you are pursuing, what spirit animates you, you might say. Um, this is a pattern that you see in the temple as well, and it shows up in the scriptures time and time again. And uh, this is part of prophetic patterns and things like that. When you begin down this path to pursue God, to pursue revelation, to put yourself in a place to receive higher revelation, let's say you sort of step beyond the limitation of your own finite being, all manner of, like, when you open that gateway, let's say, all manner of spirits you open yourself to all manner of spirits. And so it's a question of, okay, what exactly am I willing to entertain here? And whose will am I going to pursue? This is, well, you know what? And you don't even necessarily have to be in pursuit of revelation for this. One way to think about it is to ask the question, what do I worship? Right? Worship is huge. Worship is more than, singing songs and praises and, you know, what what religion is my name on the rolls of rolls? Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, what's your like outward sort of identity? Worship is all about attention. What do you give attention to? What do you value? As conscious beings, we can only do one thing at a time, right? And so what that means is that in a given circumstance, if there's multiple things competing for our attention, we're going to have to create a value hierarchy, right? We're going to have to stack rank them and orient ourselves towards the thing that's most important to us. And whatever sits at the top of that hierarchy is the thing that we're oriented towards, and that's the thing that we worship. And that's the direction we're going to go, right? So, you might think of it like they'll tell this to, people that are learning to ride motorcycles, for example. I've never ridden a motorcycle, so I've just heard about this hypothetically. Maybe you have, I don't know. But they'll say when you're riding, you have to be careful to keep your attention where you want to go. And I have personal examples that can kind of attest to this as well. Like I found when I'm backing out of the driveway, this is the past place we lived. There was a car that was always like parked in exactly the most inconvenient spot. And I would notice that if I would look at the car to try and drive around it, that somehow I would just like subconsciously drift towards it. And so the advice that they give, motorcycle students and that I had to realize as well is that you have to look to the clear space because that's going to determine where you go, right? If you're looking at, if like you're riding down the highway and you see an accident, you can't look at the accident to try and get around it. You have to just like look straight to the clear space. So attention and worship work the same way. Whatever it is that your attention is riveted on, that's the direction you're going to go. And that's also going to determine what you then become, right?
Yeah. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And so if your heart is set on, for example, we'll say money, you are going to begin to take the shape and form of money, which is, we'll say, materially abundant, but spiritually vacant, right? This is what Christ says when he says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world, but he loses his soul, right? And you look around and you start to see that like in our society today, this is exactly what's happening, right? We're becoming materially abundant, but spiritually vacant. You look around at like our architecture, it's sleek, but it's uninviting, right? Very like futuristic-y. It's like robotic, soulless though. Does not capture the same spirit that maybe more traditional architecture did, which seemed to have some kind of life about it. And that's just a pattern for everything. It's like sanitized and it's sleek and it's clean and it has absolutely no life to it internally. And this is the result of focusing on money and material things and stuff, for 2,000 years. It gets you a scientific revolution. It gets you an enlightenment, which gets us more stuff, right? The technology we have now, we're like, if you look at the world GDP over the last 2,000 years, what we have compared to really any other time in the world is like absolutely unprecedented. I think this is why when you have prophets looking forward to our day, like Mormon and Moroni, the thing that like stands out to them more than anything is our wealth, right? It's material abundance. It's all of this technology that we've acquired, and we're really, in that sense, richer than any past generation. And we're also dealing with, this meaning crisis, this spiritual crisis, this identity crisis, this like internal, mental health related challenges are at an all-time high. And those things are absolutely correlated, right? And so that's kind of the idea. What you look at determines what you're going to become, what you embody, what you worship. So, and that spirit, what the spirit of Elijah, the doctrine of Elijah is sort of inviting us into, is to know and understand. I mean, you can put it really simply. It's to know love and it's to know life and it's to act um, sort of as an extension of that, as an embodiment of that. And so the purest source is going to be the thing at the top, right? And this cascades. So like, there are lots of levels to this fractally. You can look at maybe your own parents, and there's some degree of love that was extended to you to bring you into existence, at least in this world, right, in this sphere, to provide you with what you have and to put you in the position to do what you're doing. And you have to pay proper homage to that. You have to be properly oriented to that in order to bear fruit. This is why you get the commandment, um, honor your father and mother, honor your father and mother that your days might be long. Something like that. I don't know if that's the exact wording. That's the only commandment in the 10 Commandments that actually has like a direct sort of blessing attached to it. And I'm convinced that that's the reason, right? It's about properly aligning yourself. Um, because the spirit of, let's say, gratitude uh, for the love that's been shown you is the very thing that is going to allow you to not only continue forward, but to have posterity of your own, right? That persists, that lasts. And this gets us to, Elijah is always related to sealing, right? He's binding the hearts of the fathers to the children and children to the fathers. And Joseph Smith says you could also interchange that word with the word seal. And there are lots of other reasons that we kind of associate Elijah with sealing, right? It's this linking together. Sealing is something that persists forever, right? So when the Lord is making a blessing to Abraham that he's going to have an innumerable posterity, that is in essence the blessing of exaltation in Godhood. It's a posterity that's going to persist forever. They've all been sealed to him by virtue of who he is and the love that he has to offer, the sacrifices that he's going to make. And so we get this in teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith as well, and some other places from Joseph and the Book of Mormon, that the essence of that covenant being made is that in this world and out of this world, they're going to hold a stewardship or a dispensation over their posterity that allows them to continue to minister to their posterity. Right. So if you want to, let's say, abide the day, because this is what Malachi is all about, right? The day cometh, it shall burn as an oven, and the proud and all that do wickedly, it shall burn them up, leaving them neither root nor branch, right?
Which, by
If
the
you want,
way, side note, proud and they who do wickedly are two separate or separated ideas. Um, I had a conversation not too long ago about this very thing, and it's like we often associate them as the same thing. Like the proud and the wicked are just like one thing. It's like, well, but there are those who are proud and those who do wickedly. Sometimes there's an overlap and they are the same, but let's not forget that the scriptures separated them. Malachi is separating them as two different trains going down the same road.
It's an interesting perspective. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and the net result, right, is you're left neither root nor branch. You're cut off from this vine, right? If you want to abide the day, what you have to do then is seal yourself. That's not the right analogy. That's not the right wording. I mean, you have to yourself reciprocate, let's say, the love, the invitation into relationship with the fathers, whose hearts are turned towards you. As a matter of fact, there's a quote on this. Oh, let's see if I can find it. I actually Hold on, you might have to edit this part out because
Oh, you're
I saw
fine.
this the other day and I thought this is fantastic. Okay, I know where it is. I can get it real fast.
Yeah, no worries. I'm good.
Okay. Okay, here it is. So this is what Joseph Smith said about the spirits of just men made perfect. Enveloped in flaming fire, they are not far from us, and know and understand our thoughts, feelings, and motions, and are often pained therewith. So they watch over us. Um, they have an investment in us. And so developing a reciprocal relationship with them, receiving what it is that they have to offer, and in turn being drawn in by that. This is the idea we get with Christ, that we love him because he loved us first. This is a fractal pattern of how the family of God works. Recognizing that love and receiving that love, and then in turn being drawn in by it. That's how you are grafted into this true vine. That's how you're grafted into this tree. And you allow that to then change you, and your will aligns to their will, which is love and service and sacrifice and charity. And by virtue of that sealing, you can then in turn um, extend that blessing to others, right? You can extend that kind of love and dispensation of light and covenant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to others. This is speaking, we're kind of painting in broad strokes here, but
Yeah.
that's the essence of the idea of sealing of eternal posterity, right? Having an eternal family. This is what it's all about. It's about being connected into this tree. First, you become one with uh, those who have a love for you, and that relationship is what's going to fill you and empower you to turn and extend the same thing into perpetuity for others.
Yeah. Um, so this image kind of came to my mind as you were talking. I don't know if this is the case for you and your experience, but oftentimes when a loved one, family member, somebody gets married, at the end of the ceremony or at the end of the evening, as you send the happy newlywed couple off to drive off into the sunset and um, whatnot, a lot of times we'll have like everybody will line up outside lined up to their car, and we'll all have like sparklers and things, and we'll be cheering for them and whatever, and it's a happy send off for the new couple, right? um and as we're standing there, we're given these sparklers, and you kind of start at the head of the line, and you ignite the sparklers. Somebody has like a lighter or something that they'll start lighting some of these sparklers, and then you just kind of instinctively turn to the person next to you, and your sparkler is lit, and you just go down the line and you help the next person light their sparkler until you get all the way down the line, and everybody's sparklers are lit. And it's kind of like the same idea of um, we are all connecting ourselves, starting at the source. The one who had the lighter is lighting the first few, and then we all kind of symbolically pass our light to others. And as they receive that light, they can now pass that light to others. And it's this train down the driveway or whatever of people, this long line of people who all have light to
Yeah.
give now, and they are all kind of joined together in this ritual of giving and receiving light, as a happy send off for the newest couple to start their journey, which I find really interesting. I just kind of had that come to me as you were talking about that. So I wanted to say it while it was still fresh, and so I didn't forget it.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting image. Um, sorry, I totally
So,
derailed this
no,
whole.
that's good. On the note of light and fire, we get an interesting variation to Malachi in it would be D&C2 as well as Joseph Smith history when Moroni comes to recite these scriptures to Joseph. So he says, "The day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall burn as stubble. For they that come shall burn them, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." So who are they that come? Well, it's this association of fathers. It's the heavenly host. It's the General Assembly and Church of the Firstborn. Um, and it's, of course, connected to the 144,000 as well. What you'll see if you study Joseph Smith time and time again is the work of gathering that has to take place in the last days, which in many respects is future yet, is a work in which the fathers and the children of the fathers join hand in hand uh, to go out and to do the work of gathering the family. So it is the reason that they that come that burn them is because of the light and the glory that they bring with them. And light is law, right? So if you opt in, as it were, to that relationship, then you're going to be edified by it. And if you reject it, it will simultaneously be the thing that destroys you.
Yeah. Man, there's a couple different avenues I think we could go down. I think the big problem for a lot of us today in this generation is and I'm not saying you and I specifically, but just um, generally speaking, this
The royal
generation,
we.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, we have this idea of like we need to burn down everything that came before us, tread our new path, be our own man, do our own thing. Everything before us was bad. Um, and I'm gonna set myself up as like the new thing or
Mm.
the new Adam or the whatever it is. That's obviously a religious term or connotation, but we see this in our media and movies, television. We see it in the way that kids um, talk about things, and it's all about being new, original. Everything before us is bad, and we need to get rid of it. Um, we see it in the constant retelling and reshaping of our historical narratives. Um, the revisionist history. Um, like everything that came before us is bad. All the people you thought were heroes are really villains. Um, and we just need to burn it to the ground and start over. Um, which in many respects I think is antithetical to what you're talking about. And the whole point of the mission and spirit of Elijah, this grafting into the true vine, turning our hearts to the fathers, to the covenant fathers that came before us, and vice versa. You can't chop yourself off from the vine and think that I'm going to be my own root. I'm going to be my own thing. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you want a definition of pride and you look back as early as, Lucifer's rebellion, let's say as an archetype, um, that's it, right? It's someone who decides that they're greater than the source that brought them into existence or, into their respective sphere of existence and decides that they're going to set themselves up. And by doing so, cuts themselves off from the source. And then they begin to wither, right? That's what a dead branch does. From dust thou art to dust thou shalt return, sort of idea. Um,
a lot of this, as I was re-watching your discussion with Todd on this, um, for the second time, I couldn't help but notice the overlap between um, the spirit of Elijah aspect of this discussion and what Elijah's purpose really is in um, administering priesthood keys for this purpose. And the gospel of the dispensation of Abraham, the covenant of Abraham, right? There's I couldn't I couldn't uh separate the two in my head as you were talking. They were so intertwined. Um the root and branch idea, Abraham being kind of an anchor point on this link, right? This chain of the covenant fathers that we graft ourselves into. And the whole covenant made with Abraham has to do with those that came before and those that come after being grafted into and a product of the true roots, the true vines, right? Um, it seems to me, and I don't know if you've been able to kind of differentiate the two, but I see such an overlap that it's difficult for me to separate the covenant of Abraham and the mission of Elijah here as it pertains to this sealing, this welding link throughout
Well,
humanity.
I'll start by maybe complicating this one step further first.
Okay,
Um,
please do.
this you'll see the exact same overlap actually if we take a step back to what Moses came to do in Kirtland as well, in regards to restoring the keys to gathering the house of Israel. Because the way in which we gather is by being united in our founding purpose, right? Our central point that gives us kind of a shared identity. And so the sentiment you get in the Doctrine and Covenants, I don't remember exactly what section it is. I want to say it's 98, but I don't think that's right. No, maybe it is. Um, is there's this injunction to go and to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children to the fathers, and it says, and again, the hearts of the prophets to the Jews and the Jews to the prophets, right? Meaning they're ancient prophetic fathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, et cetera, et cetera. And if you think about this in terms of like a mountain, right? You think of a genealogical tree as a mountain. The source, we'll say Abraham, is that up at the top, right? And then it will break down kind of into the multiplicity as it goes down the mountain, down the generations. If we're all going to come together in one, um, man, it's so funny because you've heard the you've heard the analogy before, whether it's a marriage or companionship, that like as you both draw closer to God, you go up the triangle, right, and come closer to each other. Um, that's an ascension that's taking place. All things come together in one at the top of the mountain, at the source. There's also why, like, the closer you come to God, the more everything starts to look like it is all interrelated. Um, there's a line from, man, I'm getting off on a tangent now, but there's a line from a U2 song uh, where he says, I believe in kingdom come that all the colors will bleed into one. It's like the most prophetic thing that I've ever heard in uh, contemporary music. Um, but that's essentially how Israel is gathered as well, right? They're gathered into the spirit of their founding covenant fathers. We're brought into oneness via the source of our shared identity. So I guess the follow-up question is then, okay, seeing how these things are all so intertwined, how do you parse them out? That's a good question. I have to think on that.
Yeah, I haven't been able to really. I haven't been successful. I think they're too intertwined. Um, I think sometimes the way that we talk about them in our discussions, like in Sunday school or elders quorum, we can kind of parse them out at a surface level. But to your point, I think the deeper we go in uh, in the discussion, I think the further intertwined they become. And it
I mean, at least one thing maybe worth recognizing here is um, Moses has a work still to do, and he has a work over which he presides, right? Which is the gathering of Israel. Same goes for Elijah and Elias, right? And there's a lot of mystery there as well. But um, I think a lot of it is being in association with those who have keys or a dispensation, you might say, or an assignment. They have a prerogative over a certain job or over people, right? And what's happening is all of these various assignments are all kind of being channeled through Joseph, the work that he's doing. And this is part of why it's actually so important to be in connection with Joseph. Um, sometimes you'll get anti-Mormons. Oh, sorry. Is my internet connection unstable? Did I cut out
Uh,
for a second?
for just a brief second.
Okay. What was the last thing that you heard me say?
Um, so this is all being channeled through Joseph for this
Yeah.
dispensation.
Yeah. Right. So it's all being channeled through Joseph. And this is part of the reason that it is actually so important to be in connection with him. Um, you know, sometimes Protestant evangelicals will pull up quotes from Brigham Young about, no one will pass into the celestial kingdom without the consent of Joseph Smith or something like that, and say, look, this is like super culty.
Mm-hmm.
They worship Joseph Smith. They believe that Joseph Smith is like, gatekeeper, has to punch their ticket, and it's like, okay, pause for just a second here. Judgment is the collective revelation of all truth that's been dispensed to you, all light that's been dispensed to you that you've chosen to turn from or hide from. Man, and this is a big topic as well. If you'd be interested in hearing more, I might refer you to a video I did on the Book of Revelation. I think the title is The Day of the Lord in the Book of Revelation or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, on the Shattering Triangles page, it's a picture of Michael the Archangel with the sword. It's a scene from Revelation 12. And shoot, where was I going with that? Revelation of all things, judgment. Um, that's what judgment is. It's who has dispensed light to you, and this is the day of reckoning, right? You're being held accountable for the gift that you were provided. Um, oh man, I'm trying to figure out mentally in my head how to work through succinctly trying to bridge the gap between where we started and where I just took us.
Well, there's a lot of um, analogies or a lot of parables that the Lord uses to kind of um, that paints this same kind of picture. Like the parable of the talents is the one that comes to mind most often. It's what you do, how well you received and utilized the gifts or the talents or the light
Mhm.
that was given to you. Um, and if you hide from it or you hide it, you don't use it and it doesn't grow, and you don't magnify the light that was given to you, then that will hinder your ability to receive more.
Yeah.
Um, that
Yeah. Eventually an
yeah,
accounting has to be made, right?
right.
Um, well, and so here's the other thing, because Joseph has because he is one with the fathers and he's one with Christ, um, we are held accountable for what we do with him. I think this is in D&C 132. But if it's not, then the spirit of it is true, which is what God said to Abraham, right? I'll bless those that bless thee and I'll curse those that curse thee. This is all connected to sealing power, right? And to those that are one with God, which is the essence of sealing power. So the way that you choose to treat someone that is thus grafted in, um, for the same reason that those who rejected Christ are going to be cut off, those who reject uh, his servants that deliver his word, that embody his essence, um, they'll be cut off on the same principle. And we get this sort of pattern in 3rd Nephi 21, which isn't actually about Joseph explicitly, um, but the same pattern applies, right? It
Hmm.
says, the life of my servants shall be in my hand. This is a meta pattern, right? Therefore, they shall not hurt him, although he shall be marred because of them. Yet I will heal him, for I will show unto them that my wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil. Therefore, it shall come to pass that whosoever will not believe in my words, whom Jesus Christ, which the Father shall cause him to bring forth, and shall give unto him power that he shall bring them forth unto the Gentiles, it shall be done even as Moses said, they shall be cut off from among my people who are of the covenant. This is all Elijah still, by the way, actually, because the same thing is true of John the Baptist as well, who comes in the spirit of Elijah. And the reason that um, it is true of him, this is according to Joseph Smith. Um, well, let me pause and just make a distinction. All Israel was held accountable for what he said. That's according to Joseph Smith. Um, my addition to this is the reason that that is true is because, like all servants of God, his heart is one with the covenant fathers. He came embodying what the law of Moses meant and what it actually was. Therefore, how you treated him was a reflection of how you would have treated Moses. And this is where we get the, rebuke from the Savior, where he talks about those that, you know, um, are very, very proud of their heritage and their prophetic ancestry. But Jesus says, you would have stoned the prophets. Your fathers killed them. You would have killed them, because he embodied heaven, right? He embodied the same spirit. John the Baptist was the same. It's all one priesthood, right? It's all one pattern. It's one mission.
Yeah.
So
Well, and,
anyway,
and John
really
the
long and drawn
Baptist,
out, but
John the Baptist, in the early chapters of Matthew and Mark, refer the people as, or excuse me, he refers to them, the priests, as like vipers. Um, and what does he say? He tells some of the Pharisees, like, you think you're saved because you have Abraham to your father.
right, right, right.
But I say unto you, the Lord can take of those stones and make children of Abraham. Um, it's a it's a stinging rebuke to the fact that the people have completely missed the point of what it means to be a child of Abraham, what it means to be a part of that lineage or the covenant associated with that lineage. It's not about blood. It's not just about existing and coming from that posterity. It's the covenant, and you've neglected the covenant. Um, and right off the bat in the Gospels, like, that's immediately presented to the reader of uh, John's understanding of his mission is
Mhm.
to turn the hearts of the people back to the covenant of Abraham as a preparer for Christ.
Yeah. And I would qualify one thing, and that is that there's a sense in which the blood matters. You go back to Abraham too, and the Lord is making promises to him, and he says, "In you, that is thy priesthood, and in thy seed, that is thy priesthood, all the nations of the world will be blessed." Um, Trying to figure out if it would be the appropriate context to say something like this. And I think it's true. The blood, the body that is um, the law is the thing that is life, right? It sustains life and it brings life. And you can think about this very, I mean, immediate, like in an immediate sense, right? As having two physical parents that give you like a physical existence here in this world. And that's the law that brings you into existence. but what being true to the blood of Abraham means, and what having the blood of Abraham means, is that you are true to who he was, right? You continue to carry forth uh, his essence in your body. This is what it means to embody the will of the Father. This is what sons or children are supposed to do, is they are intended to be the extended body of the Father's will. So yeah, I mean, to your point, what he's saying is, here you are born and you're neglecting the law that brought you into existence, which is the character and the nature of who Abraham was. So those things are all
Yeah.
interconnected. I've learned that embodiment and law are very one and the same.
Yeah.
So
And the Abrahamic Covenant is so interesting. The scriptures, if you go to Genesis, is it Genesis 15? Is the first time that we have the promise made to Abraham that this covenant is offered to Abraham, and he's promised that he will have posterity. Um,
yeah, it
and
shows
this
up in a
is
few places. I think over the course of chapters 12 to at least 17 or 18. But yeah, we get it kind of in a few iterations.
um, yeah, I'm trying to find. I'll look for it later. I was gonna try and find the specific verse. Actually, if you want to give me a second,
Yeah.
I'll pull this up. It'll be easier on my phone. Um, I've been I've been studying Hebrew for a little while now, um, and I actually got the um, I had the audacity to actually start taking Hebrew classes, biblical Hebrew.
Mm.
And I just finished my first class, or my first semester, um, last
That's
week.
super cool.
So um, I am by no means an expert in any of this, but I have been reading um, a lot of research about the Hebrew Bible, and the different interpretations of various passages of Scripture in the Hebrew Bible, many of which should be totally foreign to most modern Christians and Latter Day Saints today. Um, but one thing I found incredibly interesting, is I read a few papers that all talk about the covenant of Abraham in the early chapters of Genesis. Um, and let's see if I can find the passage. Um, when the Lord tells Abraham that through the covenant he will be promised that um, the nations of the earth will be blessed through the seed of Abraham, and that he's told that his seed shall be as numerous as the stars in the heavens. Um, this is the same promise that he'll have posterity as numerous as the stars and or the sands of the sea.
Mhm.
Um, this is made in a couple different chapters. Um, but the first time it's made, um, oh, it's going to bug me now that I can't find the specific verse. Um, the first time that it's told to Abraham that he will have posterity, uh, he's basically told to leave his tent and look upward into the heavens, and the Lord tells him, uh, look into the heavens and see if you can see the stars, see if you can count all the stars. So shall your seed be, is how it's rendered in a lot of English translations. Um,
Looking at Genesis 15:5. Yeah. I was able to find it with a quick control F
well, there you go. Um,
for those, yeah, following along at home.
so let's go. Yeah, let me read that. Then in the vision, and this is an English translation. It is, I believe, this is the NRSV, based off of the Masoretic Hebrew. It says, "Then in the vision, God took him outside and said, 'Look toward the heaven and count the stars, if you are able to count them. So shall your offspring be, or so shall your seed be.'" Um, the term, we when we read that verse today, a lot of us, because earlier in the passage he's asking Abraham to number the stars, so shall your seed be. So we automatically think he's talking about the number of posterity. But the actual term used to denote the to be, so shall your seed be, your seed will be like the stars, is not a term of
Quantity,
quantity.
quality.
It's a term of quality. Um, and the idea is, and this is presented in a number of different texts, in ancient Israel, both in the scriptures and out of the scriptures. But the idea here is the stars in the heavens make up the heavenly host of the divine council, or they're a manifestation, they're a physical manifestation in the heavens of the actual beings.
You might like this shirt here I've got.
Absolutely,
I'll send you the link. It's
that's awesome. Yes,
purchase. It's yeah, friend of mine did it. And yeah, it's so fun. It's supposed to be a cosmograph, so this is like
yeah,
phenomenologically how you experience the world, the universe.
that's awesome.
A
Yeah,
heavenly host right up here is the stars.
so that's the idea in the ancient world. The stars represented, were either literally or were a physical representation of the divine hosts of the divine council. They were the gods. And we even see this in ancient Rome and Greece and Mesopotamia. We see it in ancient Egypt, where the different gods could be represented or pointed out in the stars, and like, well, this star represents this god, or that star represents that angel or that deity, in the ancient world. And so the term being used here in this verse, "So shall your seed be," that the Lord uses for Abraham, is one of quality, saying, "In you, through this covenant, your posterity, if they maintain that covenant, they will be like the stars of heaven in quality and in kind." Meaning your posterity will make up the heavenly hosts. They will make up the divine council of the gods. And later, when we get to 1 Corinthians 15, and Paul is referring to the resurrection and the resurrected bodies being divided by the sun, the moon, and the stars in quality and kind, the rest of that chapter, that refers to Abraham, is a hearkening back to the Abrahamic Covenant, in which some scholars reading through Paul's writings today are saying Paul is explicitly referencing back to the covenant of Abraham, and that in the resurrection, all of the posterity of Abraham who were true to the covenant of Abraham are resurrected to become gods of a different quality or kind in the heavenly host. And that's really what Paul is getting at. That's why he compares the resurrection to the stars in heaven, the sun, the moon, and the stars, of different degrees of light. I find that pretty fascinating. But it's always been about quality. It's not just quantity. It's always been about who we are and the degree to which we receive light, like the stars in heaven. The quality of the stars in heaven make up the heavenly host. That's godhood. It's resurrection. That was all promised to Abraham in this couple of verses.